Welcome in, everyone. If you are listening to this, you are probably someone who loves to learn. You want a thorough way to get well-informed without feeling totally overwhelmed by information overload.
Right, because there's just so much out there.
Exactly. You are in the right place, and we are so glad you are joining us for today's deep dive.
We have a sprawling, incredibly complex journey mapped out for today.
We really do. Today's mission is pulling from this massive compilation of history, anthropology, and modern geopolitical reporting, all centered around one specific group of people.
The Gurjar, or Gujar community.
Right. Our goal here is to explore a historical paradox. We are looking at how a single ethnic group can be simultaneously associated with ancient royal kingdoms, fiercely independent nomadic herdsmen, and modern-day political flashpoints across 3 different countries. Okay, let's unpack this.
To give you a bird's eye view, the Gurjars are a vast, incredibly heterogeneous agricultural and pastoral community.
Spread out pretty widely today, right?
Yeah, they are spread primarily across India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. What makes them so unique to study is that their historical role in society is remarkably diverse.
I mean, they exist on a staggering spectrum.
Exactly. On one end of the spectrum, you find them intrinsically linked to several major ruling dynasties in the Indian subcontinent.
And then on the other end of the spectrum,
some Gurjar communities today are landless nomads with no fixed property of their own, just navigating highly militarized borders.
to go from ruling empires to wandering the mountains without a permanent home requires a massive historical shift.
It really does.
To really understand them, we have to start with their name. The Sanskrit origins of the word Gurjar give us a major clue about their early identity. It breaks down into 2 parts.
Bor and Ujar.
Yeah, Gur, which translates to enemy, and Ujar, meaning destroyer, so quite literally destroyer of the enemy.
It is a formidable title, and it aligns perfectly with their early history. Historians trace their identity back to a powerful presence in the Middle Ages, around 570 CE.
They were so influential that entire geographic regions were named after them.
Yes, the modern-day Indian states of Gujarat and Rajasthan were actually known as Gujaradesa, or Gujaratra, for centuries.
Which translates directly to the country ruled or protected by Gujars.
Right. It paints a picture of a people who were heavily entrenched in the power structures of antiquity.
But digging into the historical records, there is a fascinating ambiguity about who they actually were at that time, like a historical chameleon.
What's fascinating here is the chicken or egg debate among historians regarding their origins.
The tribe versus geography debate.
Exactly. There is a deep scholarly discussion about whether Gurjara initially started as the name of a specific nomadic tribe that eventually established a kingdom, a janapada, which was essentially an ancient realm or republic, and gave its name to the geography.
Or, conversely, if it was a geographical identity that people later adopted as an ethnic label.
It creates a complex puzzle for historians looking at ancient royal titles like Gujarashvara or Gujaraja. It becomes highly debatable whether those kings were ethnically Gurjara or simply the rulers of the Gurjara territory.
Even with that ambiguity, the records make it clear they were a major force. There is a specific, really memorable detail from a text called the Harsha-charita.
Ah, the biography of a king written around 630 CE.
Yes, by the author Banapada. He describes the king's father as being a constant threat to the sleep of Gurjara.
That phrase alone speaks volumes.
Right.
It proves that even in antiquity, the Gurjara were a known, powerful presence that rival kings actively worried about and campaigned against. We see records from collateral branches, like the Gurjaras of Lada, who claim their family was ruling Baruk from their capital at Nandipuri as early as 450 CE.
Documents from the 7th century suggest a very wide distribution of Gurjaras as a central political power in western India.
But over time, that central power begins to fracture.
By the 10th century, the massive Gurjara empire started fading from the forefront.
They are recorded more as local chieftains, warriors, or as later Mughal documents describe them, a turbulent people.
The turbulence, the constant movement and adaptation leads directly to the tapestry of faiths and borders that define the community today.
The geographic and demographic spread of the Gujar people in the modern era is immense. In Pakistan alone, major cities in the Punjab province, like Gujranwala, Gujar Khan, and Gujarat, bear their name.
Demographic estimates suggest Gujars comprise up to 20% of Pakistan's total population.
It is a massive group.
I was looking at demographic data from a 1988 estimate that looked at the total Gurjar population across the entire subcontinent, and it will blow your mind.
Yeah.
The religious diversity is striking.
Out of the total population, about 53% followed Islam,
while almost 46.8% were adherents of Hinduism.
alongside a tiny fraction, about 0.2%, who were Sikh.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, why does this matter?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that near 50-50 split between Islam and Hinduism is the direct result of centuries of regional turbulence and shifting empires.
The historical texts objectively recount how different segments of the population converted to Islam during successive waves of invasions.
The earliest major wave dates back to Mahmud of Ghazni's raids in Gujarat in 1026.
Later, the Gurjars of Awadh and Meerut traced their conversion to the late 1300s when Tamerlane sacked Delhi.
By the time Babur invaded India in 1525, he noted that the Gurjars of northern Punjab were already practicing Muslims.
And those conversions continued into the 1700s, with Aurangzeb forcing the conversion of Gujars in Himachal Pradesh.
The critical turning point for their socioeconomic status is tied directly to these invasions.
Because when successive empires sweep through a region, they naturally claim the best, most arable agricultural land.
Many Gurjar communities, who were previously settled farmers or local rulers, were systematically pushed off their ancestral lands by groups like the Pathans and Balochis.
To survive losing their farmland, an agricultural society has to adapt.
They were forced into vagrancy and nomadic lifestyles, moving into the forests and mountains.
And relying entirely on livestock, because animals can be moved when borders change or armies approach.
That transition from settled rulers to displaced nomads sets up an entirely new chapter of their story.
Because out of that displacement, some of these communities developed incredibly complex, specialized ways of life. Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about the Van Gujars.
The forest Gurjars of Uttarakhand, India.
These folks are a pastoral, semi-nomadic community living in the Shivalik Hills area, and they practice transhumance.
In the winter, they live down in the foothills of the Himalayas with their herds.
When the summer heat hits, they migrate all the way up to alpine pastures higher in the mountains.
The relationship they have with their animals is profound.
They herd semi-wild water buffalo, and they make their living entirely by selling milk to local towns.
They strictly never eat their animals, and they never sell them for meat.
It is a remarkable, highly specialized agrarian lifestyle.
Going back to that religious tapestry we mentioned, the Van Gujars follow Islam. Yet their social structure includes their own distinct clans.
Which function a lot like Hindu Gotras.
Exactly. Meaning they are strict exogamous lineages where people trace their descent back to a common ancestor.
It is a vivid example of how ancient cultural traditions survive and blend over centuries, regardless of broader religious shifts in the region.
But that thousand-year-old way of life is currently running headfirst into modern state bureaucracy.
The sources detail an intense ongoing conflict between the Van Gujars and local forest authorities regarding land use.
It is a foundational clash between modern environmental conservation and indigenous traditions. Local forest authorities have increasingly prohibited human and livestock populations from living inside certain reserve parks.
Their stated goal is strictly wildlife conservation and protecting fragile ecosystems.
The Van Gujars, however, are relying on India's Forest Rights Act of 2006.
This specific legislation was designed to grant formal land rights to traditional forest dwellers,
essentially legally protecting their access to the very lands and migratory routes they have relied on for generations.
You have state officials trying to maintain pristine, newly created national parks on one side,
and a nomadic people trying to maintain a symbiotic relationship with that exact same land on the other.
It forces a very real conversation about who gets to decide how natural resources are used and what happens to people whose entire identity is tied to moving across landscapes that suddenly have rigid bureaucratic boundaries drawn over them.
It highlights a severe livelihood crisis. That crisis is not isolated to the forests of Uttarakhand.
Across the subcontinent, different segments of the Gurjar community are fighting for survival, political recognition, and basic economic rights in highly volatile ways. So what does this all mean?
Navigating democracy in modern political systems has led to some intense flashpoints. The protests in Rajasthan, India, between 2006 and 2007 are a stark example of this.
The Rajasthan protests objectively illustrate the sheer complexity of India's reservation system.
This system is a form of positive discrimination designed to help historically marginalized groups access government jobs and higher education.
At the time, the Gurjars in Rajasthan were classified as an other backward class, or OBC.
Feeling increasingly marginalized and facing economic hardship, they demanded a formal change in their status to Scheduled Tribe, or ST, which comes with its own specific, highly coveted quotas.
Politics played a massive role in setting the stage for this conflict. During the 2003 elections, the political party in power had actually promised the Gurjars the Scheduled Tribe status in exchange for their support.
The historical record shows that promise was a major catalyst. After coming to power, the party failed to deliver on the status change,
This broken promise led to massive protests starting in September 2006.
which eventually escalated into severe, sometimes fatal clashes with police by May 2007.
The pushback did not just come from the state either. There was heavy opposition from other citizens.
The situation was highly combustible because other tribes who were already on the central list for Scheduled Tribe status actively opposed adding the Gurjars.
Their reasoning was based entirely on economic survival. Adding a massive demographic like the Gurjars to the ST list would drastically increase competition for the very few protected government positions and educational resources already set aside.
It was a fight over incredibly scarce resources.
Ultimately, despite the scale of the protests, current classifications note that the Gurjars in Rajasthan remain categorized as other backward class.
It is a sharp reminder of how ancient, powerful identities struggle to translate into modern political capital.
If the Rajasthan protests were about navigating the red tape of democracy and resource allocation, the modern struggles in Pakistan and Afghanistan are about raw, life-and-death survival in conflict zones.
The Swat Valley resistance in Pakistan in 2008 demonstrates the extreme measures these communities sometimes have to take.
In Pakistan's Swat Valley, the Gujars are a distinct group from the dominant Pashtun tribal confederations in the area.
In 2008, a Gurjar community leader named Pir Samula did something that completely reframes how you think about local resistance.
He raised a private tribal army, around 10,000 men, to actively oppose the Pakistani Taliban and protect 20 of their villages.
Samulu was the first tribal leader in Swat to raise a Lashkar, or tribal militia, against the Taliban.
It was a monumental stand for a community trying to hold its ground against heavily armed militants.
Tragically, Samullah and his forces were eventually overwhelmed and defeated. The Taliban executed him and desecrated his body by hanging it publicly in the town square.
Samuel's resistance in Swat Valley shows a community trying to hold its ground. But just across the border in Afghanistan, we see what happens when that ground is taken away entirely.
The Gurjar population there faces a completely different but equally devastating set of challenges.
Demographic reporting indicates there are an estimated 1.5 million Gujar people residing in Afghanistan.
They are predominantly located in northeastern regions like Kapisa, Baghlan, Balkh, Kunduz, Takhar, Badakhshan, and Nuristan.
Under the old Afghanistan constitution, they were officially recognized as one of the country's 14 ethnic groups.
They even had delegations meet with former President Hamid Karzai to formally demand basic infrastructure, schools, hospitals, and scholarships for their students.
The reality on the ground, however, is that many are severely deprived of basic rights and live in extreme poverty.
They have faced significant internal displacement. Reports from 2018 show that around 200 Gurjar families were forcibly evicted from their homes in the Farkhar district of Takhar province by illegal local militias,
pushing them further into the margins. That marginalization reached a breaking point during the COVID-19 pandemic.
There is a deeply unsettling reality documented in the Badakhshan province during the height of the outbreak.
The Gujar people there had absolutely zero access to clinics, doctors, or any health facilities.
Out of sheer desperation to treat the coronavirus, they resorted to using the meat of a local animal called the andak.
The use of andak meat is incredibly significant.
Within their specific cultural context, the local Gurjar Tribe Council had explicitly deemed the andak as a protected or unconventional animal,
making its meat strictly haram, or forbidden to consume under Islamic law.
Yet, the people stated they simply had no other choice.
It is a harrowing illustration of a community pushed to the absolute brink, forced to compromise their own deeply held religious laws just to survive a global medical crisis in total isolation.
Yeah.
When you take a step back and look at the sheer scope of this journey, we started with ancient kings whose very name meant destroyer of the enemy.
We trace their path from ruling vast swaths of the Indian subcontinent to being displaced by shifting empires.
We saw them adapt into specialized nomadic pastoralists herding buffalo in the Himalayas.
And we see them today navigating incredibly complex reservation systems in India, fighting militant groups in Pakistan, and surviving extreme isolation in Afghanistan.
For you listening, understanding the Gurjars provides a brilliant shortcut to understanding the broader complexities of South Asian history and identity.
They are a mirror reflecting centuries of empires rising and falling,
Borders shifting.
and people doing whatever it takes to survive the crushing weight of history.
Phobia.
This raises an important question for you to mull over. In our sources, there is a concept put forward by British anthropologist Stephen Land in 1999.
The concept of Gujarism.
Right. Analyzing the massive Gujar population in Pakistan, he theorized this notion of Gujarism, which he defines as Kin Network Activism.
It is the phenomenon where Gujars are deeply conscious of their shared ancient identity, and they actively use that tribal consciousness as the foundation for their modern social and political participation.
They activate thousands of years old kinship networks to navigate contemporary political landscapes and protect their interests.
So as modern borders become increasingly rigid, and as urbanization accelerates globally, will cross-border kin network activism, like Gujarism, become the ultimate political survival tool for marginalized groups?
Or will these ancient transnational identities eventually dissolve entirely into the modern nation-state? It's something to deeply think about the next time you look at a map and simply assume that the borders define the people inside them.